Okay. Hello, everybody. Can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me? So if you can hear me, just raise your hand. This is nice. So this is the first time I'm doing something like this. Like with a headset, you're talking to like the fact that you can hear me on headset feels nice. Okay. Hi everyone. So thanks. So that's me. That's me, and I'm going to be talking about technical principles of developer experience (DX). So my name is Shodigo Ayomide, and I work with Polygon as the global head for developer advocacy. So basically, what Polygon does is, so I'm sure we heard it talk about. Can everyone hear me? Awesome. So Polygon is more like an Ethereum scaling solution where we just basically help scaling Ethereum. So trying to deploy smart contracts and stuff like that. So we help make that easy with Polygon. So that's in summary what Polygon does. But that's about Polygon. Let's get right into the main stuff, right? So next. So what is developer experience and what's this about? So this is the big question, right? So developer experience is similar to how we see user experience, right? That's UX. But the difference between DX and UX is that DX is developer focused and UX is user focused, right? So we see things like UI, UX, just like user experience and user interactions. So DX is developer experience, UX, user experience. So they are different, they are not the same. So we help developers feel great about what they say, achieve great, what they achieve because they transition from documentation was easy. So helping developers move from their documentation to implementation is what DX is primarily about. So if we say, okay, the developer experience of your product is great, what they mean is that moving developers from that point of using your product to the point where reading your documentation, like implementing. For example, if you think about like Node.js, like libraries, JavaScript libraries, there are documentations we get to read so we can understand how to implement them. So that's the documentation. So helping developers move from that implementation to from that documentation to implementing your library, your API, or like any other thing you're building. That's what developer experience is about. So popular question about developer experience, right? So popular question about who is a developer advocate. So technically, a developer advocate is technically advanced. That's the number one criteria. So I know that today everybody's developer advocate. I get the idea, but so most importantly, yeah, so developer advocates are engineers also. I'm just going to say that fact out there. So developer advocates are different from community managers, right? They are not the same. So when someone says, I'm a developer advocate, the person must know how to code, like how to write codes and how to like build applications. So if you want to be a developer advocate, you have to know how to write code and how to build applications. So it might just be like for web, for mobile, IoT, but like you must know how to code, which means number one criteria, you must be technically advanced as a developer advocate. And number two, a community builder. So these are the two major things that makes a developer advocate. Number one, being technically advanced, and number two, being a community builder. So like what's going on here? This is community building, helping bring people together and help people advance technically in their skills. So a community builder. Number three, expert communicator of technicalities, right? So technicalities, being able to break down complex code, being able to break down complex theories and explanations into simple things that everyone can understand. So as a developer advocate, you must be able to like explain things that even like someone of like 10 years old will be able to like understand what you are saying. This one of the most important parts of being a developer advocate. So this is one of the major reasons why companies hire developer advocacy, because they feel like the developers we're trying to get to, let's say for example, I have a SaaS product, a software as a service product. I want the people to understand the like kind of product I'm building. So I'm going to say, I think your APIs are it's not documented, no, I don't understand it. So you need a developer advocate who is going to basically break down the complexity in understanding the APIs on what's going on there to the people. So number three here, so you must be an expert communicator of technicalities. And number four, you can sell software tooling and libraries to developers. So in some way also, developer advocates are salespeople. They get to sell softwares, right? So they meet with people on the road, say, hey, what do you do? Okay, this is what I work at Paystack, I work at Polygon, I work at Stack Overflow, I work at this company. You must be able to sell the service to the people, right? You must sell software. You go to Ikeja, you want like, as you're walking through Ikeja, someone's like, hey, come here, want to come and buy our software, come here, let's do this. Like, you must know how to sell stuff. So I'm not saying we are pulling you. So yeah. Who has been to, I think the best example for this last one is, who has been to Katangwa, that area? We are sushi this place. So. Okay, so those days. So as you are walking, then they drag you. One guy says, as I'm passing, I go carry knife. Because like these guys will keep they keep pulling you. So the idea why they are pulling, okay, we live in Nigeria. Some people want to kidnap you or they want to do something bad. But I'm coming from the standpoint of the fact that one of the reasons why they are pulling you is so that you can purchase what they are selling. That's the idea. So as a developer, you must be able to sell software to people. How do you sell software to people? You must be able to like preach the software in a way they will understand what you are saying. Really important. Let's go to the next slide. So user experience is how general users uses your platform, right? So basically the flow of between when they log in or when the front screen, when they log in to like seeing their dashboard, going to settings page and stuff like that. So that's the user experience, right? That's not developer experience, that's user experience. They're basically their experience in using your application. That's the user experience. But in this talk, we're going to be talking about how to improve developer experience. So developer experience here is the flow when people like developers are trying to implement or configure your SDK API or NPM package. So this is primarily what developer experience is about. So when a company say, okay, we want to improve the developer experience of our application, this is what they mean. They want to help more developers move from the point of actually reading the documentation and doing actual implementations with their documentation, of rather with their API or SDK or whatever they're offering, right? And they're going to hire you as a developer advocate to help them do this thing. You want to improve that documentation. You want to like help them explain. You want to build samples. So, and yet again, I'm saying again, developer advocates are engineers also. There's like developer advocate and there is community manager. So these are two different roles. They're not the same. So if you are a developer advocate and like all you do is like manage community, you are a community manager. But like the two things that makes up a developer advocate, number one, a developer advocate is technically advanced and a community builder. So these two things brought together is who exactly a developer advocate is. So they build examples, build code examples in different languages and stuff like that. Let's go to the next slide. So the difference here again is developer focused and general user experience focused. Again, DX and UX. So again, now I'm going to break down developer experience into two things, value and time. So value is I can reach my goal with this API, number one. That's number one value. Number two value, this API provides even more than I need right now, and that's exciting. So to a developer, that's exciting because number one, using this like it's fully documented. It has everything I want. Like it has all the value I want, even more. That's exciting. That's value. Then the next thing is the API provides like more than I need right now. Let's look at time. So I can reach my goals with this. Like I can reach my goals in a short time because it's well documented. Number two, this API doc is amazingly straightforward. So value and time. Whatever SDK you are building, APIs, whatever you are building, it must be able to like provide the value that developers need, and you must be able to solve that problem in short time, in less time. For example, for those who do like DevOps, so we've heard of scenarios where say, hey, for example, how long it takes like to create EC2 instances, things like that, right? It works, but the problem is that it takes time. So being able to, like, for example, build something that will compress the time it takes to create EC2 instances and things like that, that's the value, right? That's the value you're going to be sending to the developers. Then the next thing is that I can get it done in less time. Providing value, then getting that value to the customers in less time. So this is what I'm going to break down developer experience to. So now, let's talk about documentation. No docs basically simply mean I built this, I don't care, figure it out yourself, don't stress me. When you write and build applications without documentation, this is exactly what you are saying to the developers. Because the goal of whatever you are building is so that like people can get to use them. You are solving problems with your API, your SDKs, and whatever you're building, you're trying to solve problems. So whatever you are building should be well documented. Should be well documented from start to finish. And these are a couple of examples. Okay, so great docs, but batch structure doesn't sync together. So you have great documentation, but the structure is bad. You have great documentation, but then like things are not aligned. You are telling me, for example, what your API offers without telling me how to kickstart it. Like you have to, okay, let me calm down a bit. I'm not sure of the experience of the house here, so let me calm down a bit. Let's say, for instance, a library, right? Let's say just a regular NPM library. We want to get that installed. So I'm reading your documentation, and the first thing I am seeing is that, okay, how you implement this library, you start with importing this, like calling, that makes no sense. You start from the point of, okay, you have to install NPM. So this is one of the major issues I have with people who write articles, right? We always assume that the audience understands everything, right? We always assume that the audience understands how to run NPM start and what NPM start is. You start from the ground, then you go to advanced. So it's like there's a progression. It goes like this. So In your documentation, you have to start from the lowest thing. For example, kickstarting this. What's the first thing I should do? Okay, install npm if you have it installed. If you don't want to write all of that, leave a link. Click this link to learn how to install npm. Leave this link to know more about like using Yarn or something like that. So writing good docs is also in line with structuring the docs properly. Good documentation, one after the other, processes. When they want to implement or like install your library, what's the first thing you should do? It's part of documentation, right? It's not just about you like putting a ton of stuff and just putting it out there, bam, take it, like look at it, make something work. It has to be like the first thing, the next thing, the next thing, and the next thing. Don't skip anything. Don't assume that the people understand how to do one thing or the other. Don't assume. And that assumption that's going to make you lose the right audience, right? You don't assume that the people understand this already. You don't. Let's go to the next thing. So this is the documentation of Matic.js. So you can see how things are going on here. For instance, look at the first thing. It says, okay, there's no light I can point. So the first thing is, okay, the Matic.js is just library, blah, 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 blah. So it's basically giving you like a breakdown of what Matic.js is, right? Giving you that installation guidelines, setup guidelines. Like, it's like you're starting from the, so they would have easily said, okay, you understand how this works, right? You understand how that works. We could just skip all of that. Let's go to setup. So I've seen tons of documentations that make that happen. We shouldn't do this, right? Like we shouldn't like skip steps and assume that the people understand. Start from the smallest thing and go to the most complex thing, right? So Noti, give tables. Structure your documentation properly. Don't just like write everything in text. This is why we have things like Markdown, right? Like structure, use tables. There are tons of features in Markdown that you can use to structure your documentation. Literally, there are people that they hired literally to just like become a documentation specialist at companies, and that's all they do. Because of like, it's not easy to do this. It is a ton of work. It's a ton of work. But then, because you are not building softwares for yourself, you are not building what you're building so only you can use it. You want the public, you want the customers to be able to look at your API, look at your SDK, and understand what you're doing. So you must document properly. Let's go to the next thing. So this is exactly what happens under the hood when there's no documentation. Your manager comes to you and says, what's going on? Like, what's going on? Then you're like, it's fine. Why you're under fire? So why exactly are you under fire? Like, you are super confused. You don't know what to do. The documentation, it's not working for you. I'll give a good example. So I transitioned into Web3 about 6 months ago. And I had a ton of problems in Web3, yeah? I had a ton of problems because the documentation was hard for me to understand. I watched videos, I read articles, I read documentation, but it wasn't helping, it was hard. I had to figure out a ton of stuff myself. So even in Web3, one of the major things that we're working on right now is to improve documentation. I was speaking with Ace recently today, and like CoSandbox just released a new feature that is going to really help and help a lot of Web3 companies like basically like, how should I put this? So I think it's called Sandbox, right? Sandbox, yes. So what Sandbox does literally is that you can build your documentation, right? You have your documentation, you're going to write it all out. But then you are just going to just embed a sandbox on your documentation page where literally users can literally live on the documentation page, not on another page, embedded on that same page. They can test out what you are building. They can test it out live. So you write the code, you test out the code, and you see a live output. That's the idea. So we have to improve documentations because like this is what's going to happen. You're going to be confused because you don't know what to do next because it's like it's not well documented. What you're trying to use, it's not well documented. You're going to be under fire. You don't want the users of your product to be under fire because of you. You want to make it easy. If your product is enough, for example, I don't work at CodeSandbox, but I can talk about it because it's a great solution and it benefits me and everybody. So I can talk about it. Your library is good. Terrible documentation. It stresses everyone out. No one's going to talk about it. No one's going to use it. That'll be like just 5 people or 10 people. But when the documentation is great and it has, so when I say, now I'm talking about documentation, but I'm not saying like have bad code and like have good documentation. Good code definitely, and have good documentation. Your code must be good. Like if your documentation is good, like your code has to be good too. So just to clear that out. So I can look back. Let me check it out from here. So I've spoken about this also. So let's just move to the next slide. So let's talk about tools for helping with docs. So when creating documentation, so we have a thing called Docasaurus. So this was created by Facebook. So if you are building a JS tool or something, you want to document it. So I know like we like using traditional things like, let's say GitHub README. Like I get that. But in some instances, you want to use something that has more exposure, where you have more ability to like you have more flexibility when trying to create documentations, right? So there are things like Docusaurus that you can use. There is Documentation.js. So these two are for like documenting your JS libraries and tools. Then the next one is Goko. For those that write Go, you can use Goko. For those who write Ruby, there's Slate, Codex2 for PHP, and GitHub README. So I'm not saying GitHub README is a great way to document your projects, but at the same time, it's not so flexible, right? It's not so flexible. You might need some additional features, and like there are some things that like Docusaurus offers that GitHub README does not. So that's one of the major reasons why you have things like this. Let's move on. Let me check out what's written there. So yeah, documentation is not just for you, it's for the end user. It's not just for the end user, it's also for you. You're a human, you forget stuff. So when you write documentation, it's not just about you, yeah? So there are times like, I'm going to document things. Okay, so when I figure out something, I try my best to always write it down somewhere in my notes. Literally, I have almost 1,000 notes. Literally almost 1,000. If I'm having a problem, I get it sorted. I go into my notes and I'm writing my solution down. Okay, this is what I did. For example, let me give a very good instance. So at a point, I had a ton of invitations on. I had a ton of invitations on LinkedIn. I think I had over 400 going to 500, and it was a lot. And there were a lot of really great people on the list. So I'm like, okay, what can I do? So what I did was I built a script that I can run on the console and automatically accept a criteria of people, and that was it. That kind of thing. I won't just throw it away. It's a big deal. So I copied that. I made a GitHub gist. So documentation and keeping record of the solutions that you arrived at is very important. It's not just for developers. It's for you also. So when we create GitHub gists, it's not just for like publicly. Is that I can go back to my GitHub gist and I know the solutions I arrived at before in the past. So when I have that same problem, I can find the solution yet again. So if you go to gist.github.com, you should be able to find that out. Let's go to the next slide. Let's talk a bit about commit messages, yeah? So commit messages are a part of the documentation of code, right? So basically, this helps to improve the flow of onboarding new developers to the dev team. So we are thinking about onboarding new developers to a company. For example, I'm a new guy. I'm joining your company as an engineer. And you add me to your GitHub organization. I go into the core of your code and I'm looking at what the team has been working on and stuff like that. And I'm seeing some very weird commits. I'm like, fix that. I'm saying fix that. Fix this. Committed that. Fix the bug. I'm like, what's the bug? What did you fix? What in the world did you do? I'm confused. Like, I'm gonna have to click the commit message. I'll read every single file you made changes in that message, in that commits push, not pre-hour. I'm gonna have to read every single file. And that's a lot of work. And imagine how many commits I'm gonna read to understand something. What if you did something like this? What if? My life is so much harder. I can easily find what exactly I'm looking for, right? I can easily find it. Like, no stress. The goal of developer experience here, honestly, right? You want to help more developers succeed. The reason why we build tools, we build all of this is to help more developers succeed. And one thing I would tell you is, this documentation of a thing, you can get hired for it. There are people they are called documentation engineers. Like, it's an official role that you can get hired for. If you know you are great at writing documentation, but like you are not really like a code person, you can become a documentation person. You can become a documentation engineer. Really, just building documentation is something you can do if you are really good at that. So let's move on to the next slide. So Prosper said this quote on Twitter, it's on his Twitter bio, that I really liked, and I want to somewhat end with this, right? A man is great by deeds and not by birth. So when I saw this on his profile, it meant so much to me because this made a lot of sense to me. So like a man is great by deeds and not by birth, right? You don't just appear and become great, right? There's a process. There's a process that there are things you will do that like you get you get big. That's the goal. And everybody here is like, we got to make it. That's the goal. We got to make it. Yeah. Am I right? Am I communicating? We got to make it, right? We got to make it. Like, we have to make it, right? And if you want to make it, right, there are things that you have to get done. Whatever you're building, make sure it's being documented properly. This is how you improve developer experience. This is how you improve the experience of developers. You don't want to make their life hard. And let me give you an instance. For example, I built this thing called React Notify. I built it probably, I think, about 3 years ago. And to my notice, like, banks literally use this. Banks literally use it. A ton of people use it. And like, I just built it because I wanted to. But like, tons of people are using the library already. There are a couple of other stuffs I've built that people are using already. So, for example, I wrote a little script for Apollo migration, and before I knew it, I got contacted by the Apollo team saying they want to take a look at it. They want to just talk them through my code. I just built it to help somebody. I had a problem. I built a solution. I pushed on GitHub Gist. I documented it, and people are reaching out to me. So the little things that we don't consider so much, like these things can take you places. So whatever you're building, make sure it's being documented properly, right? Make sure. Don't say it's stress. Don't say it's too much work. Make sure it's being documented properly. So if you're interested in like things like Web3, so I'm sure. Okay, I'm not going to. It's not a Web3 talk, so I won't go really deep into Web3. But Web3, in simple terms, Web3 is blockchain, right? Web3 is simply blockchain. That's Web3. So if you're interested in learning about Polygon and how we work around Web3, so just visit this link. It's a Google form. So someone from my team will reach out to you if you can fill this link. So if you're into Web3 or want to get into Web3, so just fill in this link. Someone from the Polygon team will get to you, and we'll just move from there, right? So if you want to take a picture or like write it down, I'm gonna move in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go now. Yeah. So thank you guys. So thank you. Yeah. So you could. Yeah. So you could follow me on Twitter at developer.io. That's developer then io. Together, GitHub, same thing. So are there any questions? Any questions? Okay, I think we have one. Is there a mic? The one's at the back. Oh, I forgot. I can only hear myself. Okay, I need to wear this. Oh, so I'll be able to hear her. Okay. Okay. Hello?
Those app you mentioned, can you use it for Web3?
Okay, the documentation toolings, like the toolings I like Dockersaurus and the documentation JS.
Yes.
Okay, so you're asking if I can use for Web3, right?
Yes.
So technically you can, because for example, when you're building things like, for example, smart contracts on in Web3, right? You have to build it, for example, in Solidity. So for Solidity, you can use the GitHub README. So like other things, you can use demo, but the issue is that it's not flexible. Like for GitHub README, you can use it for any language, but like Dockersaurus, documentation JS, Goko, Codex2, those ones are language specific. You can decide to use it for anything you want to use, but the issue is that it's not flexible. It's not flexible. There are some functions, there are some like things you will write, like it won't work. It's not have proper formatting because like they were built specifically for JS, right? So, but for like Solidity and for like Web3 stuff, you can use GitHub README. So GitHub README will be your best use case for Web3 like applications. So, for example, if you are building your Web3 like app, let's say you are building something Web3, but you're using Node.js or like front end in React, you can use like the JavaScript one. But like if you are using core language like Solidity, Rust, I think there was one that I posted for Rust. Let me see. None. It's Ruby, sorry. So for Rust, so you could just reach out to me. We could find one that, I've seen one that works with Rust, but I've not seen any for Solidity yet. But yeah, but if you can't find any, your best use case would be GitHub README. So yeah. So any other questions? Going once, okay, one question. No, the mic is coming, I think this is a really cool one. I like this thing.
So my question is this,
yeah.
Please, is there any advice or tips for writing good commits?
Good commit messages?
Yeah, because you stress about commits, writing good commits, and also reading documentation, but I'm particular about writing good commits.
Okay, so there are people literally, so there are offers you get those offers because some people, whenever you GitHub, they clicked on a project, clicked on commit messages, and they are seeing how you commit your code, right? They are seeing how you commit your code. They're going to look at those stuff. So tips for writing good commit messages. Whatever your commit messages is, it has to do with the kind of changes you made to that project. For example, let's go back to that. Let's go back to that slide. So for example, let's say there's a problem. Okay, let me use the best use case scenario. Let me say something very simple. Let's say, for example, we have a tool online. Let's say it's called imagehype.co. Let's say you want to track how people use your website. You want to track how people use your tool. You want to implement Google Analytics. Like you don't have it there before. So when you like insert that into your head tag in the index.html, you put that into the in your public folder, you put that in there and you push it. Your commit message is going to say added Google Analytics or something like that. Then you can just put in bracket feature, then in front added Google Analytics. That's all. You won't write fix that, fixed analytics, fix this, or put ... commit. It doesn't work, right? I'm going to have to click the commit message to really see what you did. And that's a ton of work. So if you can summarize all the changes you made. So another thing is we should learn how to commit as we code. You don't commit after writing all the code. You begin now they commit. You know they work like that too. You know they work like that. So for every single feature you add to your project, you have to learn how to, for example, if you work on one feature, you commit that feature. Let that one fly. If you want to make another change that's separate from what you are initially working, that goes to a separate commit, not together. So learn how to separate your commits. If you're working on two different things, separate the commits, don't merge it together, unless you're going to have a really long commit message. And that's not good for developer experience, because it might not fit into that line, then you're going to have like a ... So good commit messages. The message is going to just basically explain what, if it's a feature, if it's a fix. If you've made a fix to what already exists, you put in bracket FIX, fix. Then in front of the bracket, you can now basically just explain what you fixed. Does that make sense? Awesome. So do we have any other questions before I move? No questions. All right. Thank you, everyone.